The uncut truth, the challenges, moving to Kenya. The raw realities of relocating to Kenya are explored in this video. A compelling perspective is presented for those considering a move or simply interested in the unfiltered truth of expatriate life in Kenya. Now, for me, the initial shock wasn't much because there's a lot of foreigners here in Mombasa. I moved to Mombasa. Hey, good morning. One of my neighbors happens to be Portuguese, and I speak Portuguese. Go figure. But for one, I did a lot of research. I did a good solid year of research on Kenya, YouTube videos, comment sections on websites, Reddit, Quora, you name it, I was there. So I had done my research before even stepping foot over here. So my shock wasn't that big. Besides, I had lived in Cape Verde for 2 years. So it kind of gave me a foot in the door of how Africa is, even though Cape Verde is more of like a place in between Africa and Europe or the West, let's say. So let's just talk about the expectations versus the dream and the reality, right? So particularly concerning infrastructure and peace of life. Let's talk about the infrastructure. The infrastructure here, I would have to say I was a little bit shocked, slightly, not too much, because in Cape Verde, it's an African country, and infrastructure, even though it's a small island, infrastructure is way better than Kenya. I was slightly shocked that there was no sidewalks, man. That was my biggest thing, sidewalks. All the dirt roads, I was expecting the dirt roads, maybe not as much, but yeah. What shocked me though, talking about infrastructure, is when you drive over here, you will notice people driving on the wrong side of the road. So if the direction is this way, you see people driving back this way, which to me was a little bit hard to get used to. Although I gotta say, now that I have a bike, I do see myself doing that from time to time, and it's just become kind of normal for me. The so-called train called the SGR, which they hype up on the internet, on YouTube. I was kind of disappointed. I was expecting better. I've been to countries in Europe, and the trains remind me of trains from Europe from 30 years, 40 years ago, actually. So I guess it's a big deal over here. I wasn't impressed at all. But nevertheless, it's always helpful to have a connection point between the two largest cities, which is Nairobi and Mombasa, which I live in Mombasa. So it gives you the option of not having to travel through bus or through airplane. As far as safari, I'm not into safari, so I can't help you with that. But the everyday grind, that isn't glamorous. There is an emotional toll though. You can feel lonely at times. I mean, but that comes with you moving to a different country if you don't have friends and family. So that's normal. But I find loneliness it's much more prevalent in the United States than over here or in most other countries. In the US, we're always on the grind, always working, going back home. Even the friends that we have, friend and family, their work schedule maybe doesn't mash up with ours, and we never see each other. It's just a little bit difficult, and I think it's easier to be lonely in the US than over here. Whereas over here, once you start making a network of friends, it's much easier and less likely to get lonely. You may get lonely, I think, within the first few months. There may be some points. But other than that, I think once you have a network of friends over here, it's so much easier not to get lonely than as opposed in the United States. Another thing I want to talk about is the familiar comforts that we have back home. For example, the easiness of going to Home Depot, or if you're in Western Europe, I forget the name. Wow. The hardware chain store, it's a French chain store where you can find all kind of drills, drill bits, anything you need to do to build a house. In the United States, we got the Home Depot, for example, something like that, or Walmart being accessible just about anywhere. You could go somewhere at 24 hours, that's open 24 hours a day if you need something. Over here, you don't have that luxury. I've wasted maybe 2 hours to 3 hours just looking for maybe something simple as a specific size screw, and going to Little Shop and asking people where I could get to this place to get this kind of screw. That's just an example. But I also have to say that Kenya, out of the African countries, has to be one of the most Western friendly countries in Africa. And by that I mean, for an African country within continental Africa, I think maybe only South Africa beats Kenya in terms of how westernized it is. It's way easier to adapt here in Kenya than it is, for example, in Uganda, Tanzania, or another country in West Africa, you name it. Most people speak English. Almost everybody speaks English. So I think it's very easy. If you're planning on moving to Africa, I would highly suggest, if you're not willing to go to an archipelago like I did in Cape Verde, which I mentioned before, is like probably the country, the African country that's the point right in the middle between Africa, and the West. I would then suggest, if you really want to go to continental Africa, come to Kenya, not another place that's westernized like South Africa, because South Africa, the crime rate is just a little too high. Kenya, things are more relaxed. The crime rate is lower. So yeah. Another problem is navigating through bureaucracy and infrastructure. The labyrinth of official paperwork, visa extensions, work extensions, permits, and business registrations. It is a pain in the butt. Understanding and adapting to Kenyan time is another concept you have to get used to. If it's a get together and they say 3 p.m., just go at 4. You add an hour, 30 minutes to an hour. What I find funny though is that when it comes to going on the bus, when it comes to getting on a train, when it comes to getting on an airplane, Kenyan somehow let go of that Kenyan time rule. Anyway, also, people here, I think, drink more than the average person in most countries. It's very popular to drink over here beer, whiskey, and cocktails. But people here really drink. I'm not saying there's a lot of alcoholics. I'm just saying people here drink when they party. Daily challenges with power outages. Now let me talk about that. Power outages here are often. Sometimes it could last for over a day. Sometimes it could be twice in a week. It is uncommon to go one entire month without going through a power outage. Water supply, that's another issue. Here in Mombasa, sometimes the Mombasa Water Company, for some reason, doesn't fill up the water tanks in the compound. So what ends up happening is I have to order water from a truck company that brings water in the truck and fills up the tank, which is much more costly. It's about $20 to fill up the tank when I spend $10 on water in a month. So yes, that could be a problem. And then water goes out. You're left for a few hours waiting. And imagine there was one time it was really, really, really hot. I had just finished working out and I get home and the first thing I want to do, because I'm sweating, is take a shower. And what happens? The water is out. Why? Because Mombasa Water Company did not fill up the tanks for the last 2 weeks, leaving me with the only option of calling a water company and bringing it personally to my tank. That is an issue sometimes. It doesn't occur often, but it does happen. And let's talk about internet. The internet reality here. They say 5G. I don't feel like it's 5G. It feels more like in between 3G and 4G speeds. And where I'm at, because I do live right next to the beach, there's only one company that offers internet service via fiber. And even then, my network speed the speed is very low, very slow. There's other options. You can get internet, Kenya's largest internet provider called Safaricom. And the speed seemed to be just as good with the SIM card, and you get a proper SIM card type of router. The routers where you could actually put a SIM card in, and the internet seems to be just as good as mine. So yeah, for me to do live streams, it would be a problem. That's another thing. As a YouTuber, it's a problem to do live streams because one, you never know about the power outages. Two, the internet speed. So there could be some lag. That's why I never do live streams. YouTube. Cost of living. Let's talk about the cost of living. Yes, it's cheaper. It's cheaper to live here. But when you compare with certain other European countries, Bulgaria, Romania, which have much better infrastructure than here, you start to wonder whether you are getting a good deal or not such a good deal. I just happen to like warm weather, being able to live on the beach, and having a no winter year kind of weather. Because if it was about getting the most for your money, Kenya is definitely not on the list. I don't think any African country is. Africa, for what it offers, the standard of living that it offers, the infrastructure that it has, and you pay to live here, to me, I don't think has a good value for your dollar at all. You have places like Thailand and other places in Southeast Asia, which are cheaper to live in, and the infrastructure is much better. You have places in Eastern Europe, the same story, cheaper to live and much better infrastructure. Okay, expats, unexpected fees, import duties, and premium pricing for certain goods. I can't stress that enough. If I want to buy a pair of brand new Nike, real ones, it will cost double of what it costs in Europe and 2.5 times, I've calculated roughly 2.5 times as much as it does in the United States. I remember going to Nairobi 2 years ago and I paid over $210 for a pair of Nikes that in the US cost $120. So yes, things are more expensive here. If you're trying to look for real Timberlands, you're going to pay, for example, Timberlands. I'm just saying Timberlands as an example. You will pay more. You'll pay more for Apple products. So those kind of things never go on sale. Well, the true expensive accommodation, comparing expat standard housing to local options, and the realities of rent. Let's talk about that. Here I've noticed you don't have really a medium. And when I say that, I mean, I'm talking about you either live in a decent place or you don't. There's no really nice place that you could get at an affordable price or a really nice area, let's say that. And then there's a middle class area. No, you're either in a nice area or you're not. At least in Mombasa, at least what I've seen through the entire coast, you're either in an area with dirt road, the housing is old, no pool, or you pay more. For example, to live here along the beach, you are looking at least $500 a month. Whereas opposed to other places that are not premium places, you could go as far as living for $100 a month. But there is no in between the 500 and the 100. And I'm not an expert in Nairobi, but from the little bit I know and what I've seen, because I've done some house hunting over there, it seems to be the same situation. So you either pay, I would say, around $500 or more to be in a decent area, unless, of course, you're getting a studio or one bedroom, small one bedroom. Of course, you're not going to pay $500, but if you're looking at a large one bedroom or a medium-sized two-bedroom, you're looking at $500 and up to be in a decent area. And that may seem like a lot if you're in the United States, but if you compare to rents in most of Europe, that's the same price that you're going to pay in most of Europe. You're going to pay $500 or less as long as you're not in the major city. In certain areas of major cities, that's what you're going to pay. I know this was back in 2018, but I remember being in the heart of the city called Tours, where all the chateaus are at, the fifth largest city in France, mind you. It's not a little city. It's the fifth largest city, was actually the capital of France for like 2 years, I believe. And right in the heart of the city was 500 euros for a nice one bedroom, right across the street from everything. The tramway, they had a tramway. It was the station of the tramway was right in front of my of the entrance of the apartment that I was looking at. Whereas over here, to have those kind of amenities by your premises, you're going to pay much, much more than 500 euros. Now let's talk about managing finances in the banking system in a new economic environment, including currency fluctuation and transfer fees. Okay, let's talk about that. In 2023, I was having a blast because the dollar just kept on going higher, 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 higher. It got to a point where it was 160 something shillings per dollar. When I had arrived here in February of 2023, the dollar was 126 shillings, okay? 126 shillings per dollar. By the end of 2023, or the beginning of 2024, it was at 164 shillings, I believe. That's 33% increase in purchasing power. Now these guys got a, but aside from that, that was because Kenya was about to default on a loan called the Eurobond, I believe, and they were able to raise capital to pay off the Eurobonds. But after that, it stagnated, it went back down, and then it pretty much stayed at around 128 shillings to 130 shillings per dollar. And now my beautiful Kenyan girlfriend is calling me, so I'm going to have to take a quick pause. But by the way, before I continue recording for this video, tap like and subscribe if you like this content. And if you want more, please let me know in the comment section. Also, ask questions in the comment section. I'll promise you I will reply. But right now, I got to end this real quick before I start recording again because my girlfriend is calling. I decided to come back inside. So, social integration and safety, building a social circle, the challenges of genuine connection and beyond the expert. Me personally, I like staying with the expats. I'm going to tell you why. If you're talking about females, it's one thing, but if you're talking about male to male friendship, the problem is that most, and I've noticed this is maybe an African thing or maybe a thing from countries where the disparity of wealth is large. People that make a lot of money usually don't want to mix up with people that are different from them. And it becomes a little hard to make solid friendships with a Kenyan, for example. I'm not just talking about Kenyan, I've experienced this in other countries too, where they feel they've accomplished something and they're kind of snobbish. So my circle of friends are usually other expats. And then you have the problem of the ones that haven't succeeded or in life or are not well off. Those are the ones that hunt you to be friends with. And those are the ones that I don't want to be friends with because they want to just use you so you can buy them drinks, take them out and you go out clubbing and stuff like that. So me personally, I stick to expats. I would say 50% are black, the other of them are white, mostly Americans, and some Europeans. And then you got, differences in the English. It's like American trying to understand British English. It's not that difficult. You get by with the lingo and all that stuff. Security concerns, I think they're very little to none. Like I said, going back, most places or all places, you're either in a good area or bad area. And the good areas, you always have security 24/7, so that's not an issue. And even outside, I've had very little confrontations with people. So at the end of the day, I could go on and on and on. But you're gonna gain some resilience and adaptability, overcoming challenges. And from my perspective, is it worth it? I think it is. Even if you plan on going back to the US or back home, I think staying here in Kenya is a good long-term move. For financial reasons, at the end of the day, you still end up saving money. If you want to venture out to something a little bit more African, where you'll get more of a culture shock, I think Kenya gives you the right balance of being a stepping stone before moving on to another country in Africa. So tell me, give me your thoughts. What do you think about coming to Kenya? Would I advise it? Yes, especially the coast. I love the coast. I love being right on the coast for a reasonable price. It's very hard to get that in the West. And even within the West, very few places are warm like here in Mombasa. So once again, tell your mama, tell your daddy, tell everybody and their mother to like and subscribe and about my channel and give me some feedback. Tell me what you think. Do you think Kenya is a good place to come? What are your intentions to come? A lot of people come here for the women. A lot of people come here to save money, but there's better options, like I said before. Let me know. So until then, pieces. Love you.